Yo,
How are you?
I'm good, brother.
We're back.
We're back for episode 3 of Optimise.
Gonna
How
keep
you feeling?
good, man. Anything
Feeling
new?
pumped.
Hmm?
Feeling pumped. We're getting some good momentum, getting some feedback on how we can make this thing better, which is quite exciting.
Good traction. Educational sort of topic engagement's been.
Yeah, and a big point from the last podcast, even though we had great chit chat at the start, people were saying, hey, I want to know exactly what you're going to offer in terms of value at the start. And then you guys like get into the free flow chit chat. I'm like, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Totally big. They want a
Yeah.
blurb.
What a blurb.
So what are we covering, mate?
So today, uh, we're each going to have our own topic. Steve is going to be talking about flexibility strategies for beginners and people that are already on that path. Talking about some simple methodology and why he found it was a vital performance for jiu-jitsu and life in general. And I'm sure you've got a cool story to explain that.
Yeah.
And then on my side of things, I'll be touching on, as we mentioned in the last episode, this idea of growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And for anyone that has read Carol Dweck's book that covers all of the research that she's done uh, in this realm, it's extremely, very intriguing. And as you go through the book, you actually feel yourself cracking open into more of a growth mindset, and you notice where you are stagnant and potentially shying away from the challenges that your life may bring. So, yeah, I'm excited to discuss that.
Yeah, and they're kind of interlinked, those topics. I think that the flexibility mindset for many, many years, people have either not had a starting point or they have discredited or not valued flexibility principle or metric. And just having a growth mindset around what you could have potentially, what you don't know, what you're leaving on the table, what you gain, sort of bring that mindset towards the podcast. There are going to be people listening to this from the jiu-jitsu community that figure if they just keep doing jiu-jitsu twice a day, they're still going to get results.
Mm,
And that's true. They're going to develop in the jiu-jitsu realm with the right mindset, but they aren't going to necessarily be doing the right stuff outside of training to continue that performance for a long term.
mm,
And burn out, get into fatigue, and then end up leaving the sport a bit early or not reaching that peak.
mm. And it aligns with that idea of Kaizen that you and I have discussed kind of outside of the podcast, but it is a strong theme for Optimize. And the idea of Kaizen is that Japanese philosophy of constant, small, incremental growth. And over a long course of time, of course, that adds up, it compounds, and it creates amazing benefits and adaptations and whatever you're talking about, if it's sports performance or business or connecting with your family. It's like the little things add up over time. Little by little, a little becomes a lot.
Yeah.
And how would that for you relate to your flexibility journey?
So I think it's important to just highlight again for any listener to this episode. I had a previous running at rugby, and tricking and military style log carries and all the fun stuff that is quite a jacked up body. People would always talk about it's in the hips, control your breath, technique beats strength. And I was just an athlete that squeezed things really, really hard for long periods of time, and I could perform at an output more than your general sort of gen pop members do. And even athletes, I was probably fitter than jiu-jitsu and MMA athlete in the room. But in a jiu-jitsu and MMA athlete, jiu-jitsu and MMA space, I'd not move as well. I wouldn't be as efficient over time. So I'd be compensating with my gas tank rope. So got me looking into how I can improve my flexibility. And I went to Japan. I lived there for 6 months, 2016.
Dope.
Cold as hell in winter, beautiful in summer,
Right.
famous skiing and snowboarding, powder snow. I think I got to minus 15, I believe. So yeah,
Dang.
it was cold.
That's worse than Dunedin.
Yeah, it was not like you leave towels outside and everything freezes. So I flew over there. I studied at university, and it meant I had to do a like gi. Japan's quite had to put on a gi. Along the journey, I was doing a PE course, and I just the lady, the coach, the sensei, she highlighted that I was failing in the movement aptitude test. So just generic sit and reach test. Sort of, can you touch your toe? How far can you reach? How well can you back bend? Sort of sumo style. And I sucked in absolutely everyone. Jump, I could lift weights, I could run, but I couldn't bend or yeah, move into these positions. And so I got a C minus on my.
Ooh.
I know I got other good marks and other topics and areas, but in terms of flexibility, I just scraped.
Hey, at least you still got the pass.
I got the pass, yes, but I thinking, okay, I'm gonna address this. I'm doing jiu-jitsu, be able to move better, looking for answers, and I was also doing Planet at the time, Eddie Bravo, and a lot of people in that community. They move well, they stretch all the time, deep rubber guard players, and they can get themselves into positions that I couldn't.
And what would rubber guard be for someone that's new to jiu-jitsu? How
Uh,
could you explain it?
fantastic hip capsule strength, fantastic alignment, basically bringing their leg up over their opponent's head and holding them in between their legs. Again, sort of I'm not going to say an outdated method because people aren't pulled out as well, but it's if it's a tool that your opponent can use, you don't want to go there. Dangerous
Yeah,
guard. Again, it sort of broke into jiu-jitsu because it was an underdeveloped area, and
yeah,
athletes with fixed mindsets just got beaten by growth mindsets moving in different directions, leg
mm,
locks, rubber guard, how we can
yeah.
incorporate wrestling. So I discovered it didn't move well, and I tried stretching. I did yoga for 4 years, and I found I got better at being in the space and spending time there and controlling my breath, but I wasn't getting more flexible, and I couldn't figure out why. And I was like, what's going on? Why am I getting the results that I should be? Is pretty much 5 days a week doing the practice. If you to bring up a Venn diagram of people that do jujitsu in years, people that do strength and conditioning, and people that do yoga, flexibility, it's a very small amount in the middle. And I'm convinced that jiu-jitsu and MMA put such a stress on our body through our limbic system. We're fight and flight, we're high stress, that it takes loaded forms of strength practice to increase your flexibility. And this is why so many people struggle if they don't move well already. So I studied and studied, and then I found the range of strength method. Lucas Aaron is the range of strength lad, and he has a community of people like what he does. It's a good style that people play around with and adapt. But like any system, is there an optimal, or do we just sort of need to allow
What
our
what is optimal? That's,
yeah.
that's another episode. What
That's
is
it.
optimal health?
And so then I needed to apply a structured sort of system to get flexible.
Yeah.
And that takes assessment. That takes time studying your body, working out where you're limited, where you're. And so a good entry level,
Give me the three. What are like the big three techniques that you found through range of strength?
off the top of my head, end range activations. So positioning yourself to your end range and then
Hmm.
be tracked and demonstrate strength in that position.
Which is it's PNF in a way, eh? Same kind of
Very similar.
yeah.
Very similar in terms of the fractions that you're going to be doing to try to generate strength, but PNF would involve like a partner or a block. We can still achieve forms of movement also. Or we could even put weight on top of us at our end and contract into it. We don't always need a partner.
Hmm.
Uh,
Wow, and like being peripheral neuromuscular facilitation, it's like anything to the end range, anything to the periphery, where you obviously you're pushing your boundary and your edge, and then you're starting to create strength in that range by actively contracting the muscle and layers of tissue. That's where you're starting to work and gain flexibility.
yes, gaining this.
Yes.
It's only working on the shortening side, the agonist. So when we also bring the second sort of point in that I'd target it, spending time The two are synergistic. So
Mm.
a lot of beginners don't align themselves properly. They rush too deep into the position and they're holding on for dear life, not feeling what their body is doing, or they're moving around, they're not spending enough time.
Probably not breathing.
Definitely not breathing, holding on to their breath, standing on an cliff, waiting, and that sort of brings them into more of a stress-based mindset. So for a beginner, the three sort of things: in-range activation, spending time in a position, and mastering the alignment that you need to perform it properly, because there's no structure.
Mm.
Most PTs, most coaches will just chuck it in at the end of a session.
Yeah, 5 minutes. I think I want to go a bit deeper into that third one you said, which is alignment. I feel like a coach can tell you the position to get in, and you can play around with it, but until you practice it enough yourself, you won't understand what the optimal alignment and position for that stretch or posture is. But an amazing thing happens over time where you start to innately understand. It's like, my body feels right here. This is the alignment. It happens very often in yoga, um, where all of a sudden you find total balance and you're not putting as much effort in. There's that balance between effort and ease. And it's like, this is where the growth is actually happening. And you may have been spending years, hopefully not, an extended period of time working against, like really just banging your head against a wall, trying to get adaptation through the tissues, but just not occurring because you're going too much effort, not enough ease.
Yes, we need periods of high intensity, but also linked to introducing beginners to high intensity methods through light exposure. Also a big advocate for introducing load a little bit earlier than
Yeah.
probably
And
most.
like I've seen often on Instagram people sitting in the butterfly position, like sitting with their back against the wall, knees out, and putting weights on the inside of the knees to start to elongate the adductors. Do you play around with that?
We did that with a group this morning. So
Ah,
I had definitely like a butterfly position, seated guard. So we use a great entry level exercise for beginners would be to sit in that position, like Fraser was saying, use the dumbbells. But before we go into our deepest range, let's get some dynamic ability and some strength. So we're going to start working our adductor muscles on, bringing the load line and then opening back up.
mm,
The butterfly movements for maybe 8 to 12 reps. And then on the last rep, you can use the load to pull you deeper. And you can also contract the antagonist muscles of the glute
mm.
to allow that length.
I love it. I love it. It reminds me of a theorem. There was a book when I was studying S&C and physiology, and it's triphasic training.
Hmm.
And it's got a quote in it saying that a good athlete can turn a muscle on fast. A great athlete, or the best athlete, not only can they turn the muscle on fast, but they can also turn the opposing muscle off at the same time. Because if you are trying to run faster and, for instance, you've been training heavy squats where your entire body has to brace and every muscle in your body is contracting, then you've ingrained that neurally into the body, into the brain. And then when you need to be able to turn the hamstrings and quads on intermittently and put it into a beautiful rhythmic gait cycle, it doesn't happen.
No.
And it's the same thing with flexibility training. It's like that is the ultimate time to do the work of learning how to engage one side of the body whilst relaxing the agonist antagonist relationship. I love it.
Hit the nail on the head there. You can do this with any exercise. RDLs is another great one to go to your end range with a Romanian deadlift and then just get a quarter, test that threshold, 10% outside of it, and then come back up.
Yeah, like, and I'm a big one because you said about assessing, and like the importance of being able to assess and like, okay, where am I? What am I going to focus on? And like, I'm sure range of strength has got a few primary techniques that they look into, being that butterfly one would be one, I imagine, that exercise.
You can compare this to a grading system. White, brown, black.
Mm,
Milestones that beginners should be demonstrating strength or range. Who's who's assessing range and then working towards going to more advanced.
yeah. P.S. I love the idea of having a belt system for the On Performance Academy in the future, and
Yes.
like having a standard for not only strength but cardiovascular potential and the mobility and recovery. It's like you've got standards for each, and if you can match it, you get the black belt or the blue belt or whatever it is.
Yeah. I think it's important for people to have standards, right? Like, dopamine driven, goal orientated. We chase that stuff down. We love numbers. Nerds love numbers.
Man, people do jujitsu for 30, 40 years to get that black belt.
Yeah. Yeah.
They stay in it because they want that
The
ribbon.
last the last thing I'm going to touch on before we move to the mindset and move into I just want to say that this is an individualized. When you're beginning, explore, start slow, learn the movements, and don't focus on how long, or how many reps, how much weight.
Well said, epic man. And I've got the itch because I want to start talking about fascia, and I want to start talking about, there is a rabbit hole we could go down in terms of analyzing the solid physical structures of muscle and connective tissue, and then looking at more of the liquid fluid dynamic structures of blood and lymph, and how it all works together as a beautiful interface, and how that relates to flexibility and strength. It's like, ah,
Let's include fascia on episode 4.
and I think like fascia, breathing, growth mindset, Kaizen philosophy, compounding, they're always going to be there, eh? They're always going to be popping up in the discourse and every topic that we're touching on. I think that's good for the audience to recognize it's like the values and the themes of Optimise as a podcast are what we just said. And like every guest that we bring on, I'm sure we're going to see a lot of commonalities between those that are succeeding at whatever they're doing in life and having those similar themes pop up in their life.
In their respective area, yeah.
Thank you for that. Very cool to hear about your time in Japan. I didn't actually know that you spent that long there. I didn't know that you studied there. And it feels very Hicks and Gracie like. Okay, so let's touch on growth mindset. Carol Dweck is a professor that researched this idea of growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And I'll kind of give you a summary of what the difference between the two mindsets are. And then you, as the listener, can go through in your own head, like, oh, how often am I in either one of those mindsets? So a growth mindset would be something like the belief that abilities and intelligence can be developed through effort. Over time, with compounding effort, you can get results in learning, your ability to learn skills, and just generally to develop new abilities. On the other side, the fixed mindset is the opposite belief. And it's more that talents, skills, abilities are more static and unchangeable. If someone was to have a fixed mindset, they are much more likely to stay in the same job that they have hated for 10 years because they don't think they could learn anything else. This is just how it is. I'm not going to be able to learn that skill or cultivate an ability outside of this phase of life I'm in. I'm just going to have to stay stuck here.
Mm.
And you can feel that fixed mindset is very stagnant when you hear those words. But you think growth mindset and you feel a bit more charged up. You feel empowered. and you feel like, I can continue to evolve myself. And you can take the pick of what dimension of life that relates to you physically through your strength, your cardiovascular, your mobility, whatever it is, mentally, your ability to focus, general mental performance, enhancing cognition and memory, socially, the way that you connect with those around you and how you cultivate harmonious relationships, whether that's with your colleagues or your family or anyone you meet on the side of the street. And then spiritually, of course, like this will dive into, belief structures and a sense of purpose, belonging, and how spirituality shows up in your life, which will be very different for many different people based on their upbringing, based on their ideas of faith and religion. But I think that's just a good framing of the difference between growth mindset and fixed mindset. And I think the key focus for me in this discussion today is, encouraging and embracing challenges, even searching out those challenges, like because the learning we get from failures, and especially when we need to persist despite all of the setbacks and despite the failures, the the learning we get from that and the upgrade is the one of the most amazing and empowering parts of life. And I'm saddened to think that many people have that fixed mindset.
I think what, from my perspective, in sort of jiu-jitsu and flexibility communities, people do have fixed mindset. Jiu-jitsu has a very unique way of leading that over time. They approach the sport going, I can't do this. This is too hard for me. This is crazy. And then they excel and they grow and they develop and they go, wow, I'm not made of glass. I can fit people. So jiu-jitsu forces a growth mindset for progress. If you have a fixed mindset, you're limited, reach the top pretty quickly, and you have to seek out challenges and potentially cross-training, experiencing with wrestlers. We can develop effectively in any area of jiu-jitsu by putting ourselves in a position to grow. Ego stops that. People who care about their rank, their belt, stop.
That's another episode.
As ego on the whiteboard.
And we could tie in with conscious and subconscious thought patterns and how the ego shows up in different ways.
Very true.
Now, I love what you said because I agree wholeheartedly that jiu-jitsu is an art form that most definitely encourages a growth mindset. And I would say jiu-jitsu for me would be the most impactful sport skill I've learned because of the way that it enhances confidence, the idea of self-defense and being able to assert yourself, the playful connection you have with another human being, which can break down barriers for people that are more kind of socially inept and like struggle in that area, can be huge. To be in that close quarters with another human, it's special, and there's something very spiritual about that. Yeah, so you could see the physical, the mental, the social, the spiritual, how jiu-jitsu it's one of the most important things everyone should get a base of.
For sure, and I think we will see more and more of it over the years. But it is also a physical sport. And we'll enter it in family-friendly gyms, and potentially they want a little bit more. They want that competitive aspect. Winning and losing is a real aspect of life in general, but also sport that we're in. If you have a fixed limited, immediately you'll stay in the shadows. You won't put yourself out there to go and experience failures. Come back to the drawing board, reassess, try again, and over time, like downs and areas of your life get better just from having the right.
Huge, man. Yeah, I think to top that off, the idea of growth mindset, like the practical application of growth mindset is it's very common in education, in different business realms or sports, and just generally for personal development in terms of fostering resilience and this idea of lifelong learning. So it partners well with that idea of Kaizen, the
Yeah.
philosophy of continuous incremental growth. And incremental is an important part of the philosophy. It's not going balls to the wall. You know, your first time trying to get into the full splits, you're not going
Yeah.
to get someone to jump on you and push 100 kgs to make sure you get into that position because it's not going to end well.
But we see it happening all the time.
Man, and we're both still guilty for it when the ego comes into a training session. It's like, oh, I want to go just a bit heavier than the plan says, as we were talking about last episode for me.
Getting a little bit greedy on the bar, cramming a bit too much into a session, 10 pounds over time,
Yeah,
and better to come back the next day and harder again.
yeah. And I'll give the basis as to why I did that and why I went off script in terms of the programming that I had. I had been rewatching some Louis Simmons commentary.
Yes.
Louis Simmons is like one of the forefathers of strength, speed, and power performance, like one of the best of all time in terms of coaching. And he said, as strength goes up, so does volume. And I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, you've got to do your volume reps to an order. You know, it's like to maintain the structure of the body so that you can withstand the heavy weight when it goes on the back of the shoulders. You don't see very strong people just come in and do 3 sets of one and then leave. You know,
Volume.
the volume's increasing at the same time. I probably shouldn't have done 60 to 80 repetitions before I started the actual working set, but that's where I was coming from.
Important that people experience a squat for 20 reps under load. Like that can cripple people, that can make them vomit. They haven't trained that style before. High volume squats are important to include. High volume anything.
Well, when you can maintain technique, it's very important. As opposed to, there's a lot of powerlifters that get injured a lot of the time. And, especially when I got into powerlifting, I got injured often because I was just so hungry for the 1 rep max.
And this is the links to beginner. Like powerlifting's become our default squat, dead, bench technique. And understand that's all they do. Like they include some accessory work, but they're very, very good at squat, bench. And so we shouldn't really take our blueprint of performance off what powerlifters say, because they're going to be happy to go in there and do the same monotonous routine 5 to 10 to 15 years, have Louis Simmons audio logs in their ear, might come from a 9 to 5 desk job. You're probably going to need to unlock range, look at other squat variations to build up that pattern, and then we can go down that road as intermediate.
Yeah. And the Schwarzenegger era of bodybuilding. It's like you go to the gym, squat, bench, dead, whatever type of press. It's like they are the things that were popularized, and therefore, for someone that doesn't love training and they go into the gym, that's what they're going to do, most likely.
I have a collection of books. I don't know if our YouTube see down there, but Arnold Schwarzenegger's encyclopedia is in there. And if you are a big fan of workouts, nothing wrong with them. If that's what you do, probably want to add some other variations into your training. But he always included pullovers, and I'm to do 100 kilos. So while he was developing his pecs with the bench, the incline, the dumbbells, and all the training, he was still opening his lats and stretching that tissue so that he could continuously perform more load, more range, bigger muscle. He did that with
I love that. That is a very good point, and I think Schwarzenegger was a very intelligent bodybuilder who could maintain proportion in his body and functionality whilst also becoming superhero aesthetic.
Yeah, in a time period where it was needed to boost the golden era, take it to the... Hey, this is an awesome segue phrase. some Q&A.
Yes, bro. I'm keen. We've got 3 good questions.
Yep. And the first one is in your element. I am so curious to find out about this. First of all, the question that we've got is, do performance enhancing drugs assist in yoga? And I'm going to slightly paraphrase this, but what a yoga competition.
I can't answer for the entire world, but from my experience and my understanding, I don't think that performance enhancing drugs are in yoga. If you're thinking of performance enhancing drugs, you could either think of like erythropoietin from Lance Armstrong being able to boost the cardiovascular
But
capacity, or anabolic steroids to increase strength and muscle mass, both of which aren't going to support you in a yoga competition too much. And yoga competitions in general, they're a relatively new thing. You could imagine a lot of the traditional gurus from India who taught yoga, uh, traditionally 1v1, one student, one guru. They probably never intended for it to be commercialized and like blown up on a stage for performance. But it's the modern era, and I actually quite like watching it and seeing it. I've got a good friend, Olivia Brown, who you probably know, Liv,
hot
back
yoga?
hot yoga. She's actually entered a few competitions, and I remember her explaining how you'd do your selection of 2 to 3 different postures,
Oh,
uh, and it'll be out of a set sequence of like maybe 30 different hatha based postures, and the judges know that you're going to be doing that, so they've got a checklist for like the alignment, the stillness of the balance, or whatever it may be. There's certain grades that you can tick off for each component of the posture. So yeah.
so it sounds to me, with my very limited knowledge of yoga competition, it sounds quite similar in terms of like how a gymnastic meaning at the Olympics might be judged. A technical aspect, a difficulty aspect,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
pounding, the combined number.
Correct. Yeah. 100%. And that's a great comparison. I'd say it's very similar to gymnastics in terms of that individuality. I don't believe there's any team yoga based stuff unless it's like competing for a nation, but not that I've seen.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And just to touch on other little gold mine for you talked about blood doping, erythropoietin, Lance Armstrong style made that famous, but it's specific breath work that can actually naturally blood dope you. To a degree. I think it's
mm,
for same level of knowledge around this as you, but like basically perform breath work to get a response of maybe your sleep, I want to say. I'm not entirely sure.
correct.
Yeah, okay. And red blood cells multiply, carrying more oxygen around your body, and the better your VO2, the better that be. But you're getting fitter without actually performing cardio, but you are still working hard during the breath rounds.
Yes. And it's like if we can stress the body in any way, we're going to get adaptation. If we can find the right level of stress for the right duration, you're going to adapt better and be able to perform better. And the idea is we are exhausting the cells with all the oxygen in the body. There's none left. There's just a high level of CO2, which is signaling to your brain, please give me some more oxygen. Please let me breathe. And then finally, we give it the oxygen it needs, but maybe we only give it a little bit. And we keep stressing and asking for that adaptation from the cells and the ability for the cell to use oxygen or a lack thereof.
And if
Yeah.
people are uh, back into performance, carbon dioxide is a huge stressor. I think they've tested people that don't have that part of their brain stem, the medulla oblongata, but I think people that can't experience fear will still experience levels of fear and panic based off carbon dioxide.
I've
Um,
seen that research.
yeah, I've heard
Yeah.
of it. I was like, wow, let's
And
address
side
that.
note, but before we move on to the next question, um, my supervisor for research next year when I'm back in Dunedin, Olivia has done a different Olivia. This is Olivia Harrison. Uh, she's done a lot of research looking at anxiety in relation to breathing and interoception. And the ways that they study it are like looking at someone's ability to perceive if the flow of breath has changed in and out of tube. And if you can have that very in-depth awareness to notice a slight change in the flow of breath, it correlates to your ability to move through stress and not get to the point of a panic attack. So I think
I'm
we'll get her on another episode because she'll be able to break it down.
Yeah, that sounds good. Add her to the list.
Yeah, yeah.
What's our next question?
Okay, next question. We're talking about neural tension during stretching. What causes it, and especially in the hamstrings?
Yeah,
Yeah. So bingo. First thing you think is sciatic nerve. There's a few different things that we could break down when it comes to neural tension. And the question, like neural tension, it actually relates to the nerve itself being stretched mechanically, which cannot be comfortable. You know, if the body isn't used to it and the nerve hasn't been stretched in that way before, the tissues respond by bam, seizing up and sending a pain response to the brain. And that's what, when you get sciatica, it's debilitating pain through the low back, back of hip and glute, and down the hamstring. So,
muscles, hip structure, piriformis is one of them as well. If people aren't studying and actively looking at, if you've got an overworked piriformis, you're potentially going to be more vulnerable to sciatica.
mm-hmm.
People like look at the pigeon stretch in yoga. That's a pose. That's an advanced pose. Beginners could start with like 90-90 position and learn action. These that from their piriformis allow the hips to find that natural rotation where the femur's getting pulled deeper into the hip pocket, the socket joint there, and then allowing that feeling to slide over time. And ultimately, that neural tension is going to come on, and then it's going to just hamstring, particularly nasty one. Usually, it's behind the knee. There's two heads looking at. Got basically a long head and your short head. Maybe a slight medial rotation with the pinky on a wall, or we're looking to get more of a head to toe style stretch. Just hell, if anyone's ever done that before. You will want to start being neural, and you want to incrementally increase over time. I think a really powerful way to sort of talk about getting rid of that feeling, move into the position, and then back off. We stay somewhere we could stay 2 minutes. If you're going too deep in the position, get back off, let that stretch build, let it leave, and then we can look at little dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. I would offer adding on to that, Steve, I would add two things to focus on. First would be the pressure that your breath creates in the hip socket itself. Because if the piriformis, which is a very deep muscle in the hip, and it is an external rotator of the hip, and in positions of flexion or extension, it can actually have multiple functions. But if the entire area is restricted and constricted by all these muscles and layers, learning how to pressurize that area can give you just a little bit more space to start gliding the muscles and the layers of tissue upon one another. And particularly if you've got adherences through the fascia, and lots of collagen fibers have been laid down because maybe we've been sitting for 20 years in the same job and we've never gotten into the pigeon stretch before. It's the first time the body's experiencing that. It's like, no, we're not going that way. Using the breath to pressurize would be a really important foundation, and then flossing.
Yeah, we just have to create enough of a lengthening phase to floss that nerve. The moment the hip is flexed, piriformis's role changes to a middle rotator. It could be smashing one nail with a hammer over and over again, and if we're not getting that release neural tension, we've got to change the way that we attack the muscle.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, man, I love talking to you, bro. I would say another simple one for, especially for the hamstrings, for the audience member that asked the question, get your heel up on a table or on a couch, something where it's elevated. You can feel the stretch in the hamstring. Flex the toes back towards the shin, and then start to lean the chest down towards the shin and start lifting and lowering the chin, as well as linking that with the flexion and extension of the ankle joint. And you're actually flossing that sciatic nerve and all the nerves moving through that posterior chain, which is where you're getting the pain. Over time, do 12 repetitions of that with a consistent rhythmic breath in and out the nose. You're going to start getting pain relief and benefits straight away.
YouTube instructional.
Yeah, man.
Can we finish up with one easy one?
Yeah.
Is there a particular set of exercises that you would value so will be valuable to microdose every day, bang for your buck to improve mobility? Maybe something that we can do less intensity but more frequency. So maybe like a daily routine. Maybe let's pick 3 and let's talk about them.
Yeah. Okay. The toe squat. Wouldn't say it's less intensity, but the majority of us wear restrictive footwear for the majority of the day, and the big toe joint really needs to maintain that ideally 90-degree flexion in the joint. The toe squat is literally just keeping all 10 toes flexed underneath in a kneeling position and then sitting the hips back to the heels. And if you can stay in that position for, my standard's 3 minutes, you should have pretty good mobility through the feet. And doing that 2 to 3 times a week, it really helps.
I'd aim, but I'd rep and I'd do it with a load, and also the deep knee bend for our flexion of the knee, and it also takes away any hip limitations, and we don't have to compensate by rounding, like getting those heels up, bang.
Yeah, and especially it's also getting the joints into that end range. Yeah, particularly through the knees and the ankles. It's providing multiple benefits, so it's a good bang for your buck, the toe squat.
Got to start with the feet.
Yeah, start from the ground up. I would also say tibialis raises in conjunction with that. So, a lot of people when they do the toe squat, they'll get an uncomfortable feeling through the front of the ankle joint and the front of the shin, especially as blood flow is restricted. So if you can strengthen the muscles on the front of the shin, on the anterior component, by leaning on the wall, hips on the wall, and flexing the toes back towards the shins, that's a good one to add in with the toe squat. You got any more? Oh, that's probably 3, eh?
That's 2. I'd add hanging in.
Oh, yeah.
In forms. I mean, the toe squat, you're going to target your knees, your ankle. I mean, we talked about 90-90 earlier. That's bang for your buck for your hips. I would include hanging because grip strength, shoulder health, decompressing our spine. We can get active with it. We can take wider grips. You can hang on the side and get your side body. Lead complex. The rated method.
Yes. Well said. I would add the couch stretch in there as well.
Yeah. Body.
Yeah. I forgot to mention before when we were talking about the sciatic nerve and the hamstring based question, the orientation of the hips. And if we're in a posterior or anterior pelvic tilt, that's affecting the resting length of the hamstrings. So we could go into much more depth with that question, because finding the optimal posture and alignment is really important. Otherwise, you could be just working against yourself for a long time, continuing to stretch the hamstrings because you think they're tight, but
Yeah.
they're actually far too elongated, and it's based on that posture you're in.
Think about the leaning Fraser. If it's out at the bottom of the structure, we're focused going on up. You really need to address, the bottom. And
Yeah.
that's happening through being able to move your pelvis.
Beautiful, bro.
Let's wrap it up. What a pleasure.
Episode 3.
We're accumulating.
Yeah. As always, sing out to me at Fraser, Beck, Breathe or the Optimal Health Model. Steve, you got any words to say?
Nah, just a pleasure on my end. Stephen Booth, BJJ. Sorry.
Yeah, we'll see you at episode 4, everyone. Thank you.
Fun.